You mentioned about reaching out to the Black and Hispanic community. You also wrote a really good piece with Time, your op-ed piece about the rise of the military cop and how they're way overboard in Ferguson. You also talked about reforming the sentencing issues with drugs, and also you mentioned about allowing non-violent offenders to have voting rights. Is your brand of republicanism, is that the new civil rights movement?
Well, you know, I think you can look at it that way. One interesting thing about the whole civil rights movement is many people forget that Republicans were a prominent part of that. You know, in the 1950s, as the Civil Rights Acts came forward in the 50s, in 1957, Kennedy votes against the Civil Rights Act, but the majority of Republicans in the Senate actually vote for it at that time. So I think the issues of the libertarian type Republicans or people who believe in individual rights believe in is that every individual deserves the protection, the equal protection of the law, due process, and that as government gets bigger or as the society becomes more fearful of people who might harm us, and we have to have, I mean, we want to protect against burglars and rapists and murderers and terrorists, but at the same time, if someone's accused of potentially being a murderer in Rock Hill tonight, police will call a judge. We have that separation of the police power from the judiciary in order to have checks and balances so everybody doesn't have their door knocked down. So those constitutional protections are important.
Define yourself, because every profile I've read of you in the last 6 months says we don't know how to define Rand Paul. Define yourself for us.
You know, I would say that I'm a Bill of Rights conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative.
Terrible baseball player.
Can you just discount the peanut gallery there on that?
I can't believe you mentioned the game after you dropped the ball like
But
never mind. Never mind. I'm sorry. I'm going to sit here and be quiet.
But I also don't shy away from the word libertarian either. Libertarian-ish. You know, I emphasize, you know, to a crowd like this that I know is conservative, that we should be the party that not only believes in the Second Amendment, which I do, and I'm a big defender of the right to bear arms, but also we need to believe in the Fourth Amendment, because if you don't believe in the Fourth Amendment, you really can't keep the Second Amendment. And I think, frankly, the right to privacy and the right to have your documents out of the reach of government is more important to young people than maybe the Second Amendment is. And they're all important, but I think it's a way of broadening our message to talk about things like privacy, which you may have not always heard Republicans talk about.
Klaus Gilbert from The Economist, University from Washington. When you've addressed things like the situation in Ferguson last week, and you have a limited government message about government overreach in terms of militarized police and stuff, do you have a problem that a lot of African Americans, their faith is in the federal government traditionally as a referee when states or local authorities misbehave, and it's very familiar to see the federal government rolling in? How do you deal with that?
I'm a big believer in the 14th Amendment, and that the 14th Amendment does allow the federal government to be a referee, and it begins, no state shall deny due process, no state shall deny equal protection, no state shall deny your privileges and immunities. And your privileges and immunities are kind of like your natural rights. So really, I think you can look at the 14th Amendment of giving the federal government power over injustice in the states. And there was a time when there was injustice in the states, and the federal government did have a role, and does if that recurs. And so you're right. I think many in the African American community see the federal government is coming in and righting wrongs that were occurring. However, I think you can also take the message of people like myself who are worried that the war on terror will lead to loss of due process, that the people who get rounded up if there's ever that type of thing to occur are people who are either unpopular or minorities or have thoughts that may not be majority type of thoughts. So I always will say, or I will often say, that the Bill of Rights isn't really for the prom queen. The Bill of Rights isn't for the high school quarterback. The Bill of Rights is for those who are unpopular or who are part of numerical majorities or numerical minorities. And I think that message will have some resonance, because you think of your ancestry as Japanese American, and your grandfather was or grandmother was interned during the war without a trial. I think the libertarian ideas of having a right to trial are things that would appeal to people who are members of any group that's been persecuted. Maybe one or two more?
Yeah. Will, do you have a question? Will be nice.
That's
Well, I will ask you one question though, leading back to you're talking about the inclusiveness in this message. How do you fight free money? The other side's giving away free money, and you're preaching a feel-good feeling to them. So,
Yeah.
you know, wouldn't most people take the free money?
You know, I think the message has to be that there is no free lunch and that you pay for it in other ways. So if government offers you something that appears to be something that you think you might want, some kind of material possession, and they pay for it through borrowing, what happens is that you think you've gotten some bright, shiny new thing, but then you go to the store to get gas and your gas costs more because the value of your dollar shrinks. So when the value of your dollar shrinks, what happens is that the poor still stay poor. Rich people can afford inflation. Rich people can afford anything really that government can do to them. So really what ends up happening is big government and debt cause rising prices and cause more harm for those on fixed incomes, elderly, and those who are poor.